Hi, my name is Randy Garner. I'm a business owner for Full Throttle Sales and Performance Coaching. I'm also a senior sales transformation consultant at Sales Optimizer, putting together a series of short videos on Salesforce implementation, enablement, and adoption. Each of the videos should be about 10 minutes in length. Lightning Adoption in a Box is about transitioning from Classic to Lightning and realizing the full value from near 100% adoption of that transformation. Remember Y2K? It was a compelling event back in the year 2000. Technically, it was the year 1999. For those of you that were too young to have lived through the hysteria that this event caused on business, basically Y2K and other events like this taught us a couple of things. That's that when demand skyrockets and resources are constrained, prices go up and the quality goes down. So the question is not if, but when. Essentially, the question that you need to answer is, do you want to make the transition on your timeline or on someone else's deadline? Lightning Adoption in a Box, basically think of it this way. If you had good adoption of Salesforce Classic, then you definitely want to follow a similar format when transitioning to Lightning. If, however, Salesforce Classic was not well adopted, then this is really your chance to do it right in Lightning and realize the full value of your investment in Salesforce. Doing it right means following a successful blueprint for adoption. At Sales Optimizer, we refer to that blueprint as Lightning Adoption in a Box. So, what's in the box? Well, before we talk about what's in the box, I'd like to share with you some statistics that we need to be aware of to make sure that we don't become victims of these statistics. The first is a survey by McKinsey of 1,700 executives around global transformation. And they asked the question about how to beat the transformation odds. The findings of that survey tell us that over 74% of all digital transformations are not successful. Now that is an interesting statistic, especially since most of these transformations have millions of dollars invested in them and they're being led by the smartest people. So why on earth would that many result in unsuccessful transformations? Think about that for a minute. All of these companies took the technical requirements into consideration. All these companies did their due diligence on ensuring they have the right technology, the right data migration, the right systems in place for a successful transformation. None of these companies went into this thinking, okay, we're as ready as we can be, and we've got a 74% chance of failing. So what is it that goes wrong so often? That's part of what we'll cover today, and we'll look to ensure that this doesn't occur in your transformation. The second thing to consider is that the statistics show us the adoption of CRMs has actually gotten worse, not better. So again, the question becomes, if we've learned so much and things have gotten so much better, why would adoption have gotten worse? And we're going to tackle that question as part of our discussion here today. So the first thing you need to understand is that there's some major barriers to adoption. What I'll cover here is not all of the barriers, but these are certainly the top 4 based on our experience of hundreds of successful implementations of Salesforce and successfully driving adoption. So the first is this idea that there's too much complexity and too low value for the users. It's important that part of your transformation address these two issues and ensure that the design and implementation has the appropriate amount of simplicity in the end user experience while creating great value to the users. The second is this component, new technology adoption. Anytime you change technology, different people respond differently, and your implementation must be prepared to address this. The third is around the topic of training, and traditional training just doesn't work. It's important, but alone, it's not the answer. And this is coming from a person that's made his living in training and development for the last 13 years. So what have I learned over those last 13 years? It's that most people forget 50% of everything they've learned within a day. And within 2 weeks, they retain little to nothing that they have learned. So the key is not training. The key is repetition and coaching over time. The key is practical application and building habits. The fourth big barrier is company culture and individual habits. Think for just a second about your sales organization and the way the culture and habits have been created. How long has it taken? And now what you're asking them to do in making a transformation is to try to get everyone aligned around the same culture, around new technology, and around doing things the same way, around building the same habits. So depending on your organization, this may or may not be easy to tackle, but it is one of those critical factors that we have to take into consideration and we have to manage. So lightning in a box, what's the blueprint for it? Well, essentially there's 4 components to a lightning adoption blueprint. In order to get really good adoption, you have to design adoption into the solution. The fourth big barrier is company culture and individual habits. Think for just a second about your sales organization and the way the culture and habits have been created. How long has it taken? And now what you're asking them to do in making a transformation is to try to get everyone aligned around the same culture, around new technology, and around doing things the same way, around building the same habits. So depending on your organization, this may or may not be easy to tackle, but it is one of those critical factors that we have to take into consideration and we have to manage. So lightning in a box, what's the blueprint for it? Well, essentially there's 4 components to a lightning adoption blueprint. In order to get really good adoption, you have to design adoption into the solution. Then what you build has to enable that design. The adoption doesn't just happen. You have to have a good adoption plan. And when this happens, you realize the value from your investment. So let's take a look at each of these components one at a time, and let's talk about what's involved. The first component of lightning adoption in a box is essentially the design. Adoption must be built in or it will not be achieved. Too often, the design does not consider all of the key things that are necessary to drive good adoption. Things like aligning your goals and objectives, your KPIs, metrics to the business design, and an end-to-end sales process that enables the achievement of these goals and objectives and KPIs. And then finally, designing Salesforce architecture to support the end-to-end process to help you achieve your goals, objectives, and metrics. That's easier said than done, but unfortunately, most people skip this step. To use an analogy, it's really like building a skyscraper and skipping the entire step of the architecture and the design of the building before you actually start building. The second component is the build itself. Adoption requires that the build enables the design and creates a simple and valuable user experience. You want to build Salesforce Core Lightning to enable all of your best practices, ensure your end-to-end sales process is designed into the build, that you've defined your KPIs for success, ensure this is also built in, and then make sure you've got the right leaderboards, dashboards, and reports that will support the execution of your best practices and give you the ability to measure and track the progress. So number 3, adoption must include training and support at all levels of your organization. It doesn't just happen by itself. So it starts with an executive alignment where the executive team responsible for the initiative the most is part of the adoption plan and they own it. It then focuses on middle management, the middle management layer where most of the really heavy lifting occurs. The middle management team is responsible for aligning to the executive's goals and objectives and executing. And they're also responsible for coaching, developing, and holding their teams accountable for adoption. And then finally, we focus on the users themselves. After you've built a good foundation around executive alignment, sales management, coaching, and then finally end user training and coaching, in all of these components, part of the adoption methodology that addresses the reason why 74% of transformations fail and why adoption is worse today than it was 10 years ago is that it requires live workshops that build the foundational knowledge that people need, weekly team coaching, a cadence of calls to enable the execution and make it part of the ongoing routine of managing the pipeline and the things that really matter. And finally, providing the appropriate level of one-on-one coaching to the end users to ensure that they have the knowledge, the skills, and the competencies to succeed. Fundament, pipeline management, win rates, and forecasting. You do that with great sales enablement apps, like having the right apps around account planning, sales process, opportunity management, performance management, whatever it is that you're trying to accomplish. You need to think about enabling that process that creates a simple, intuitive, and valuable user experience throughout the entire organization. The decision to stay with Classic or go to Lightning comes down to the value proposition. If the cost to stay outweighs the cost to move, then you'll make the decision. To help you make that decision, here's how we think about it. The value to a client is a Lightning solution that is aligned to your sales process with nearly 100% adoption guaranteed. Number two, the solution focuses on the key barriers to adoption that we just covered. Number three, the Lightning Adoption Blueprint, which focuses on designing in adoption, building in adoption, ensuring a great adoption process is followed with training and coaching programs focused on executives, on managers, and on end users. Thanks again for dropping by. If you need to reach me, I can be reached right here on LinkedIn or by my Sales Optimizer email. Once again, if you liked the video, please hit the like button, share, and subscribe. I look forward to working with you in the future.